Hello, welcome. Hello. It's nice to see some people are attending this webinar. I'm really excited today to bring you this webinar on the basics of fertilizers. Nice little introduction. It feels like I haven't done one of these for a really long time, so this is going to be really fun. So let's start off with a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. So if you're here now and you have to leave, then don't worry. A couple of hours time, we'll send you a link and you can watch it all again. Also, you're welcome to share that with any of your colleagues, technicians, etc. If you find this useful, they might find it useful as well. Anyone you know that's completely missed it, if they haven't signed up, they'll be able to get a link on our blog post on our website to watch the webinar from there. So the slides, I'm going to put this link up to download the slides towards the end of the webinar, so you can grab those. There might be some information on there you want to keep if you're not taking any notes. Hopefully those will be of use to you. And because of the nature of this webinar, I also thought what I might do is put a link on the blog post to download the slides as well. So if you need to grab those in a later time, you can do so. I've got Jack Baxter in the comments, so he's going to help out and answer any questions in the chat that you might have. If I see anything that looks quite interesting to the rest of the group, I might jump on that and expand as we go along. But otherwise, just feel free to send a question or obviously email or phone call afterwards. So let's get on with this. So right, so we're doing today an introduction to fertilizers. I'm Daisy Lacey. I work at GreenBest. My role is sales and product development. So obviously day to day, talking to customers, advising on fertilizers, formulating fertilizers based on their requirements. But I'm also product development. So that is bringing new products to market. So we're looking for new materials, etc. New services. I've been working recently on the website and also the customer portal. And I have a current project, which is really exciting, which I'm going to tell you about in a little bit. Although I'm sure some of you already know what I'm going to say. So there we are. So why this webinar? So this webinar is obviously something I know for me is quite basic information, but I appreciate for a lot of you it's something that just needs to be sort of covered occasionally. I've been asked to do webinars training things for technicians. So if you have technicians in your group and they're joining you and they have no fertilizer knowledge at all, then this information is just ideal for them because it's very sort of basic and they can understand what they're applying to the customer's lawns. That's very important. So yeah, I'm basically doing this webinar because I've been asked for it. And if you have any more requests for webinars, then you must tell us to do those. We really love your interaction and feedback. So I'm hoping also, this webinar will help you make some better buying decisions to understand your products more. That's the sort of very core of it, really, to get the most out of fertilizers. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover what is a fertilizer, what is NPK, what does that stand for, how does NPK affect lawn growth? We're going to look at some of the nutrients that you see in fertilizers and the technologies within those. We're going to look at how you can adjust NPK to make different seasonal products, liquid fertilizers versus granulars, the difference, why you might use one or the other, application rates, granule sizes, and then lawn scorch. At the end is just a topic we just need to cover there, because that's quite important. All right. So what is fertilizer? So fertilizer is quite simply something that we add to soil to make it more fertile. And fertile soil is soil that allows lawn to grow lush and healthy without restriction. So if the lawn has got all of the nutrients it needs, it's got plenty of sunlight, plenty of water, then it's going to grow really well. That's the theory anyway. So we apply fertilizer because we're taking nutrients away from the lawn. And when we're mowing or scarifications and you remove material from the lawn, you're actually taking away nutrients in that material. Things like nitrogen and phosphorus and iron, those things are held in the leaves. So when you take them away, then the actual overall content of the lawn and the soil is less. So fertilisers need to be applied to replace that, and that's the whole reason that we're doing fertilisers. Also, some fertilisers you can apply to a lawn to get a certain effect, and we'll come on to that in a bit. So that's what a fertiliser is. So within fertilisers you have nutrients, and I talk about lawn nutrients. These are the elements that plants need in order to grow, and they're split into two groups. So you have the macronutrients on the left. These are the nutrients that the lawn needs relatively large amounts of in order to grow and be healthy. And then the micronutrients on the right-hand side of that slide there, these are the ones that are needed in relatively small amounts. So on the micronutrients on the left, you can see carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen at the very top. These are needed in quite large quantities for a lawn, but we don't actually need to worry about putting these in fertiliser, because carbon and oxygen come from carbon dioxide, which the plant takes in through its leaves, and hydrogen and oxygen come from water, which the plant gets in through its roots. So we don't need to worry about those at all. So nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, those are the three I've highlighted there in bold. And those three are, you'll see, N, P and K. This is what we refer to when we're talking about a fertiliser ratio, NPK fertiliser. These are the three main fertiliser ingredients, if you like, that we use, although we do obviously use the others, and you'll notice some of those names, you'll be familiar with some of those. So N, P and K, those letters are the chemical symbols that scientists, chemists would use. If you're familiar with the periodic table from maybe science lessons at school, that's where those letters come from. And obviously N for nitrogen, phosphorus is P, potassium rather awkwardly is K, but you know, it just get used to it eventually. So I remember when I was preparing for my job interview to come here to GreenBest nearly 8 years ago now, and I was looking into fertilisers because obviously I had no fertiliser knowledge at all back then, but I had been to university and I sort of had biological knowledge, and so I came across NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and I thought, oh, I'd have a look at a fertiliser packet to actually see what they say on the packet. And yeah, I went to the garage and I had a bag of Growmore, I think it was a 777, and there it was, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and all started to sort of realise in my mind that this is what we're talking about when we're talking about fertiliser, is elements. I had never really even considered what was in fertiliser before that. I just assumed it was just some kind of stuff you put on the grass and it makes it grow. So understanding that was really quite good for me, quite interesting, obviously very important for my job. So have a look at we'll have a look at a couple of other NPKs now. So SmartLawn Droughtsafe is a really nice familiar one. It's a very simple NPK of 19, 3, 9. And so what those numbers actually mean is they relate to the weight of that element in the bag. So Droughtsafe 1939 contains 19% nitrogen, 3% phosphorus pentoxide, and 9% potassium oxide. And you'll also be wondering about those oxide names. Well, this is just a little quirk of how the fertiliser industry works. So we always tend to talk about phosphorus and potassium in their oxide forms, and also you'll know magnesium and calcium and quite a few others are referenced in their oxide forms. And this used to be, we used to explain it as just being the available forms of these nutrients. That's why it's related that way. But really it's just that back along when we started producing fertiliser, those particular forms of elements were the ones that the chemists were able to identify in their soil analysis and in fertiliser analysis. And it just stuck that value is what goes into the NPK reference. It's not like this everywhere. In the UK, we do tend to refer to the oxide values, but in Australia, for example, they don't. So they would refer to elemental only. So if we were selling Droughtsafe in Australia, we'd be talking about selling a 19, 1.3, 7.47, because they literally are talking about N, P and K. So it's just something to sort of be aware of, but everyone is so used in the UK to the oxide values that it doesn't really have much of a difference. And as long as you're, just applying it as per instructions, there's nothing really for you to worry about there. We'll have a look at Ultimate next, which is a 2510. This one's got a couple of extra ingredients in it. So obviously we have 19% nitrogen, 20% nitrogen, sorry, that's wrong. Phosphorus pentoxide, potassium oxide. We also have magnesium oxide and calcium oxide. So 2.5% of both of those. And you'll see their elemental values are slightly different. It's just because of the weight of the element. We're getting quite scientific, I'm sorry. But there's it sort of changes as you convert it into an elemental form. So the reason we've put magnesium oxide in there and calcium oxide, those are extra ingredients to help the lawn in the spring. Magnesium for green up, for lawn health, calcium oxide for lawn strength as we go into the summer and into the autumn. So we can put things into fertilizers to help depending on what the job is at hand, essentially. So let's have a look at some of these nutrients, because this is the most interesting bit for me, is what they actually do on their own. So if you were going to apply just nitrogen, just phosphorus, for example, what would you see? So the fertilizer nutrients, they all have different roles in the plant. So we can use them in different ratios to get the desired effect. And so if you're thinking about applying maybe, a 10-10-10 all year round, there's going to be some times a year when some of those nutrients are not required, or maybe required more than they are in that product. And you might find the lawn is just not reacting very well at certain times a year, or you're applying too much and you're actually wasting money because you're spending money on something that's not needed. So it's really good to adjust those levels as you go throughout the year. And also, in this new world where we're thinking about sustainability, we need to think about carbon emissions. So certainly nitrogen fertilizers, we don't want to overdo those because they are quite high on carbon emissions compared to the other nutrients, and we want to just make sure we're applying what we needed, only what is needed when it's needed. So we'll start with nitrogen, because I've just been talking about that one. So nitrogen is needed for growth in a lawn. So you'll know this, you put nitrogen on the lawn and it just sort of starts to grow quite rapidly. The more you put on the lawn, the more it grows. And this is what we call luxury consumption. So the lawn can have as much as it needs. And I think this is because in nature, nitrogen is quite hard to come by for lawns. It's very in demand. So everything living in the soil wants nitrogen. The bacteria want nitrogen, the fungi want nitrogen, the plants want it. So normally it'd be quite competitive. So in this case, if a plant can have it, it will take it. And that's how nitrogen is just sort of taken up. So nitrogen tends to not hang around in the soil very quickly, obviously, because the lawn just uses it. But also it actually leaches away fairly quickly. We have this problem where nitrogen, as it's applied, if it's applied in a granular form, if it's not used quickly enough, it can turn into ammonia gas and just sort of disappear off into the atmosphere. It can, if it's watered in, it can be in solution, and it can actually just sort of, if there's too much rain, wash away in the soil down to lakes, rivers, the sea, etc. So we have to be mindful of how much nitrogen we're applying and how we apply it. So what we have with lawn care, obviously, is we want to not have to apply fertilizer to the lawn every month. That would be nice. Most standard fertilizer materials will have a 4 to 6 week release pattern. This is what you get if you're just going to apply something quite cheap from the garden centre. You have weeks along the bottom here. The time goes along the bottom, and as you get higher in this graph, it's more nitrogen release. So essentially think of it as growth, so higher growth. So a standard release nitrogen material is going to be 4 to 6 weeks release. at the push. And obviously, if your treatments are 3 months apart, 12 weeks or 3 months apart, then you're going to see, well, the customer is going to see a nice green period where the grass is growing really well, and then halfway through, before you come back again, it's going to stop growing and it's going to get a bit paler, and then there'll just be nothing happening, and the customer will be like, well, that didn't last very long and you're not coming back again for another month and a bit, so what do I do now? And then at this point, if you've applied a lot of nitrogen at the 6 week point, the rest of it is going to wash away, it's going to be gassed off, and then if you've applied too much, there's money wasted, money down the drain. So what we use in lawn care, which is really useful, is coated nitrogen, and we call controlled release nitrogen, where we have a coating on that granule. It stops it being turned into gas, it stops it being washed away unnecessarily. It doesn't tend to have that initial boost pattern of growth, so you don't see an initial sort of green growth if you're using just coated nitrogen. But it does increase that growth phase. You tend to get more of a sort of tailing off, so there's less of a drop in the sort of obvious stopping growth and drop in colour. So what we tend to do when we're formulating fertilisers is actually use a combination of controlled release and standard release. So you do get this nice pattern of, oh, that's impressive, what you've applied to my lawn looks really good, and then it sort of trails off, and then by the time you come back to do another treatment, the fertiliser's worn away, and then you'll get that lovely growth again from the next treatment. So the bottom curve there, that's slightly sort of lengthened out one, that is from the Nutrilon V90 that we have in the bottom right hand corner there. So that is our coated nitrogen granule coated in a polyurethane shell, and this is effective for up to 12 weeks. You will also have heard of stabilised nitrogen, and this will probably become more forefront as we go sort of forward towards the microplastics ban. So our stabilised nitrogen is called NMAX. We've already incorporated that into one of our SmartLawn fertilisers this year, the SmartLawn Spring Green Light. And so stabilised nitrogen is different to coated nitrogen. It is a nitrogen granule. It is coated in something, but it's a soluble chemical that's designed to inhibit the transformation of nitrogen within the soil into a usable form. So it will stop the nitrogen from being gassed off, should stop it leaching away quite so quickly, and then it will make it available to the plant just a little bit slower. It is not quite as reliable as coated nitrogen. It doesn't have that longevity of coated nitrogen. The most we can get from stabilised nitrogen NMAX is about 8 weeks. That's if it's applied as a granular. So it's like a nice halfway house. We can use all three to get this nice sort of curve on the release pattern. Yeah, as we go forward in the future, we may see more stabilised nitrogens coming forefront. So let's leave nitrogen now and go on to phosphorus. So phosphorus is needed for growth of leaves and roots, and we tend to usually have thought about it for mostly roots, but it's needed for a growth of everything. And the lawns will only use the phosphorus that they need. So they won't, if you apply loads of phosphorus to a soil, it won't just suddenly make the grass grow loads. The lawn will only take exactly what it needs, then just doesn't want the rest. And the phosphorus happily does not actually leach from the soil very easily at all, just moves very slowly. Lawns, more often than not, they actually need to use their roots to go in search of phosphorus rather than waiting for it to come to them. So when we apply phosphorus, we tend to do it very little and very often all throughout the year, so that you get this sort of constant movement of phosphorus in the soil, just enough to provide the plant with what it needs without sort of really overdoing it and wasting any money. Most lawns, actually, most lawn soils have got plenty of phosphorus in them to last them for quite a few years, but it's usually in fairly unavailable forms. so we tend to apply it just to sort of help with that. You can help your lawn get access to that existing phosphorus using mycorrhizal inoculants, so you can get that mycorrhizal pairing with fungi in the soil going. Also get the bacteria in the soil stimulated, get some nice phosphorus cycling going on. And potassium is the last of the main three. So potassium has many important jobs, and traditionally, and this is how I was taught when I started in the world of fertilizers, it's traditionally thought of as an autumn nutrient. So you'd apply a good chunk of it in the autumn for preparation over the winter to keep the leaves strong, keep the diseases out. But actually, it's actually most important for managing water balance within the plant. So vital for drought tolerance even. So really, we need to think of potassium as something that's used all year round. So you can apply it in autumn, definitely, because it will help strengthen the plant over the winter. But definitely also needs to be applied in the spring in order to prepare it for long, hot summers. And as we go on in the future, we may find the summers get hotter, even the springs and the autumns get hotter. So we will need to prepare along with plenty of potassium. And potassium, it is also subject to luxury consumption, so you can put on more of it to get more of an effect. But the problem with it is that we tend to find the materials can be quite salty, so you can do scorching damage if you apply too much. And also it leaches quite quickly, so it can just be washed away fairly rapidly with a good rain shower or two. But the good news is that it is stored in the plant. So we don't tend to use controlled release potassium because it's just a bit of a waste of money, all that money put into coating potassium. When the plant does keep a regular supply, if you've applied a bit of potassium and it's gone, you're not going to see this drop off of growth that you would see with nitrogen. So potassium tends to be just left as it is in a fertilizer, but we even out the amount that you apply over the year, rather than just doing this sort of up and down like we do with nitrogen. Magnesium is quite interesting. We put magnesium into spring summer fertilizers, mainly for green up, because magnesium sits at the very heart of the chlorophyll pigment, and chlorophyll is that green pigment that makes the grass green. So if you apply magnesium, the grass thinks, oh, look at this lovely magnesium, I'll produce loads of chlorophyll, and it goes really green. Subsequently, over the coming months, it would then realise it didn't need quite that much, and it would start to degrade it. But magnesium is really good for a nice green up. And if you want to have green lawns without the growth that comes with nitrogen, then a bit of magnesium is really useful for that. So the next one for green up is iron. And iron is essential for the production of chlorophyll, so it doesn't actually sit within the chlorophyll pigment, but it's used in the production of it. And also, again, like magnesium, causes a temporary green up. Iron can be very fast acting, especially if it's applied to the leaf itself rather than to the soil. And iron obviously causes moss blackening, which you pretty much all will know. If you apply iron at a high enough rate, it will cause moss to blacken. It will even actually cause grass to blacken if it's applied really, really high. The grass will usually come back from that, but in the long term it's quite a bad practice, because you put too much iron sulfate into the soil, you can acidify it, and depending on your soil pH, it can cause long-term problems with the soil health, cause problems for the lawn in the long term. Right, so remember at the beginning of this webinar I told you about my super secret project. So I'm going to talk about the GreenBest Academy. I've just been going through a few of the nutrients in some detail, but not a lot of detail. And so the GreenBest Academy is the kind of place where I'll be able to do lots more detail on these subjects. So what that is going to be is online training courses. These are going to be premium video quality training courses brought to you by myself and my colleagues. We're going to be doing some in little courses, some large courses, some bundles. You can buy lots of courses all together, that sort of thing. It's going to cover all of our markets that we currently supply to. So that's sports and amenity, professional lawn care, horticulture. And the first courses that I'm working on are for you guys, lawn care professionals. And we're going to start off with a bundle of courses that will be available titled Advanced Lawn Nutrition. And they will be available hopefully in January 2023. So this is really exciting. We're sort of starting to get there now. So I'm really excited to bring you that. So definitely, if you're enjoying this webinar so far, then this will be of interest to you. Right, let's go back to our webinar. So seasonal ratios, we've talked about the nutrients and what they can do. We didn't cover all of them, but I said, well, I'm going to do loads more detail in my advanced lawn nutrition course. So you'll be able to go and do that at a later date. So let's have a look at some basic NPK seasonal ratios here. So we've got the first column, first row, high nitrogen fertilizers. These are spring summer fertilizers, lots of growth, lots of green. These are in the SmartLawn range, Ultimate 2510 and Droughtsafe 1939, and also as a slightly lesser extent our new light products, which are Spring Green Light, which is a 15510, and a Summer Safe Light, which is a 1509. These are the spring summer products. So high nitrogen fertilizers are for the main growing season. Also for renovations, once you've done the scarifications, etc., renovating a lawn, get that grass growing really well, you want high nitrogen. And as a bit of advice, if you're going for a high nitrogen fertilizer, we're talking sort of 18% to 22% nitrogen. Sometimes you'll see higher than that. If you want to go this high nitrogen, then at least 50% of that nitrogen needs to be controlled release in some way. Otherwise, it's just going to grow so fast the customer will not be able to keep up with it. So the higher the nitrogen gets, the more percentage of coated nitrogen you want. So if you want to buy maybe like a 30% nitrogen product, then you probably want to have more like 75% of that of that nitrogen coated. So a 30-0-0, 75% coated nitrogen. That's a sort of safe level. So the higher the nitrogen gets, the more coated you need in order to level out that growth curve and have a product that's actually going to work and not cost you too much money, because nitrogen costs a lot of money, especially these days. So looking at the other side of that, we can use low nitrogen fertilizers. In fact, low nitrogen fertilizers are pretty useful for autumn, winter, maybe even very early spring. It's not a good idea to apply lots of nitrogen when it's cold, because very cold temperatures and growth of lawns causes disease. We call it it's gone. So we call it it's a kind of growth that can be disease. You can get diseases quite easily, so that's something you want to avoid. So in the late autumn through to the very early spring, 6% nitrogen is about the limit. If you want to do anything higher than that, then there needs to be some coated nitrogen in there. And we have a product actually called SmartLawn Stretch, which is a 28% nitrogen. That one can be applied any time of year, but the majority, and I think it's 75% of the nitrogen within there, is controlled release, which won't actually release the nitrogen until the temperature warms up. So as long as you've got that, then it would be fine. But with the SmartLawn First and Last I've listed here on the second row, that's all fast release nitrogen. So that's a simple sort of, late October treatment, a little bit of green up, maybe you're doing an iron treatment either side or something. That's what that one is for. So high phosphorus is the next one. As I said before, we tend to apply phosphorus in low levels all year round. That's a standard 3% for most fertilizers would be fine. If you can apply that twice a year, that would be ideal. If you do it for every treatment, that's fine. In some cases, so if you're going to seed a new lawn or turfing a lawn, or maybe doing a really big renovation, where you're taking away basically everything, then something like the seed starter would be useful, where you've got a little bit extra phosphorus. So that's a 6, 10, 8. And that's a really good NPK for encouraging growth in new plants. You've not got very much nitrogen there because you don't want to get carried away with the leaf growth to begin with when you've got root development to be getting on with. So seed starter is ideal for those occasions. And generally that's the only reason you might use high phosphorus in those situations. And then I did mention about potassium being an all year round thing. So yes, back in the past, if you've been buying from GreenBest for quite a long time, you'll remember maybe a 10-5-20 that we used to do in the autumn. We dropped it down to 10% a few years ago because we didn't have problems, but we just felt like it was a bit too much potassium. It was the cost really. It was more expensive than it needed to be, and it wasn't really given any. It didn't really make a difference as to whether it was 10% or 20% was applied. There are problems if you do a 20% potassium feed. There's a possibility for scorching, and as autumns tend to get slightly warmer now, the possibility to scorch gets slightly more. So we felt like dropping that to 10% was better, and then just to maintain the potassium in the other treatments as well, that would be suitable. So yeah, we balanced potassium throughout the year now rather than doing it up and down. And you just apply it with pretty much every treatment that you do. Right, let's get on with some liquid versus granular. So this is quite interesting. I often get new lawn care companies come to me and say, I want to do just liquid treatments. Pros and cons. So with liquid fertilizers, they're quite low input. So you might buy a 16-2-10 liquid, but you're applying actually, once you've diluted it, very little amount of nutrients to the lawn. So they are very quick acting. Those nutrients can get straight into the roots or into the leaf, depending on how you've applied it. But they're not going to last very long because there's not much quantity of nutrients there for the plant to actually use. So with liquid treatment, you may be talking up to 4 weeks before you start to see a growth and a colour drop off. So yeah, liquid fertilizer is very good for sort of low input treatments, or maybe some deficiency corrections. But generally for lawn care, we see granular fertilizers as being the sort of the mainstay product range. So these are high input. They obviously have variable reaction times. There's some materials that can react within maybe like a week. There's some that take a little longer. Just depends on the on the material that's used in the formulation. And of course, there's extended longevities possible. So we already talked about coated fertilizers, maybe going up to 3 months. And that's something that is really interesting for most lawn care. So when we do application rates, you'll always find application rates for fertilizers on the labels. So every fertilizer by law has to have a label on it, and one of those things it has to have on the label is the analysis table that we looked at the very beginning, where it says the amount of NPK and whatever else is in there. It will also have application rates on there. So these will be given usually a suggested amount per area. So in this example, I've got 200 to 400 milliliters per 100 square meters. And often the amount of water that goes into can be given as well. So we might say if it's a foliar application, i.e. you are going to apply it and get it to sit on the leaf so that the leaf takes it in directly. You'll only want to apply that 200 to 400 mil in 6 litres of water across the 100 metres squared. If you want to apply that product to the root, so you want to make sure it's washed down into the roots, it doesn't sit on the leaf, then you want to apply that 200 to 400 mil in 10 litres of water and cover that 100 square metres. And of course, these are suggested rates. It's all going to depend on your nozzle type, how fast you're walking, how often you've had it serviced and everything, and whether you're getting problems with the sprayer, so how fast you're going to walk as well. So these are suggestions, and obviously with your PA6 qualification, you know how to calibrate sprayers anyway. So the label has some information, but not everything that's needed. Granular is a little bit easier because obviously it's just apply a weight over a certain area and there's no water to worry about. So we generally always provide application rates, but we don't necessarily apply give the spreader settings. Although in the SmartLawn we do provide spreader settings for pretty much all of the granular fertilizers. We just need to be aware that the effective rate is going to be different depending on the age of your spreader, the granule size, how fast you're walking, the wind direction, etc., etc. So all of these things do affect it, and obviously a spreader calibration is always a really good idea when you have a new product. I always suggest that 2 passes is better than 1 pass. So if you can work out the half rate settings for your spreader and then do like passes this way and then passes 45 degrees or 90 degrees, the second time you'll get a much better even result, especially over a wide area. And if it's a small lawn and using a hand spreader, also again, if you can work out how to do it with a half rate and do a couple of passes, that would be much better. So with application rates for granulars, we go for grams per square metre or kilos per hectare, whichever one you're more used to. It's usually given in both. And then it usually tells you how many kilos of nitrogen, phosphorus pentoxide and potassium oxide per hectare. And this is obviously not really that important, but if you are interested in learning how many kilos of each of these you're applying over the course of a year to make sure that you're sort of balancing out right, then that would help with your calculations. That'll probably be something we come on to another time, and it will also definitely be covered in one of our online courses. So granule size is something that we get asked about quite a lot, and we do offer 2 different granule sizes for a lot of the SmartLawn fertilizers. And the reason we've always done 2, and most of the industry has 2 available, is because from golf courses you have mini grade, the smaller grade for tees and greens and the really fine cut turf, and then for the outfield where you want something that's going to fly a bit further in the spreader, something a bit cheaper, it's the lawn grade, the larger size, where obviously you're not too worried about people seeing those larger granules. So when it comes to lawn care, we sell both because they're both equally popular. And for most things like the spring and summer products, we see about 50-50 people buying either, so we can't decide which one to get rid of, so we just keep both. There are some cases where we only do a product in a certain size, and there's usually a particular reason for that. So the one example is the black and green, which is a high iron fertilizer, and that's only available in the mini grade, because with iron products, if you apply larger granules and you get less granules per square meter in your square meter, you get more chance of speckling. So with an iron product, we tend to only go for the smaller granules to get much more even coverage. So they both have their plus sides. So the mini grade, actually, if you want to drop your application rates down a little bit, maybe to 15 to 20 grams per square meter, then mini grade is better for this, because you're going to get more granules per square meter, therefore more even coverage and less chance of speckling. Mini grade also, because the granules are smaller, they are naturally quicker to act, they dissolve faster, and there's more of them. So you might see, depends on the rain and the conditions, but you might see like a 3 or 4 days head start on mini grade compared to the lawn grade. And then the low visibility after application. So if you have customers that don't want to see the fertilizer after it's been applied, then this one's pretty good for that. On the other hand, you have the lawn grade, the 2 to 3 mil, And this one has high visibility after application. So if you like to see where the fertilizer has been spread, or the customer likes to see that something's been spread on the lawn, then this is the ideal one because the granules are just a little bit bigger. It also, as you're applying it, you can see where it's gone, so it makes it a bit easier for you to actually do your job. And then also it covers large areas quickly because the large granules, they fly a bit further, so you might get effective width on your spreader a little bit further than you would if you were going to do mini grade only. In terms of dust, mini grade tends to be slightly more dusty than the lawn grade. That's just because there's more particles in the bag, and as the bags get picked up and moved around, they create more dust. So if that's an issue for you, then definitely the lawn grade is the option there. Now I'm going to quickly talk about scorching because this is obviously something that you can do when fertilizers are used incorrectly. And it's because fertilizers are salty, basically, and some materials are more salty than others. So if you're applying too much salt, fertilizer salt to the lawn, it's going to cause it to be damaged. In this picture here, you can see a homeowner has applied a fertilizer with a drop spreader, which is a bad start. And there's parts of the lawn where some fertilizer has been applied in the right amount and you've got nice green patches. And then there's parts where there's too much been applied and it's actually started to die off. So that in the middle, those brown patches is what we would call lawn scorch as a result of fertilizer. And so the way to avoid this really is just to stick to your fertilizer application rates, calibrate spreaders, make sure you're using products that are safe if it's going to be really warm and no rain for the next few days. If there's no rain coming for the next week, then there needs to be watered in. So and we're not talking about a bit of a spray with a knapsack sprayer. It's 30 minutes at least of sprinkler action on each area of the lawn. So watering in, if you're not going to be able to water in or the customer can't water in, then it's using a low or non-scorch product in the summer. Obviously we've got Droughtsafe or Summer Safe Life for that. In the autumn and in the early spring, it's usually not a problem because you get enough rain. And yeah, applying with care. Don't use drop spreaders for fertilizer. Use broadcast spreaders. So they fling the granules out rather than just dropping them straight down. And then you won't get that sort of stripy pattern. Right, and then lastly, before we finish, if you have lawns that they just don't seem to react no matter what you do, then you definitely need to consider a soil analysis to check the pH of that lawn. So very low or very high pH can actually affect the availability of certain nutrients within the lawn. So it may be that you have a particularly low pH lawn and you need to worry about certain nutrients, and then there's certain things we can suggest to apply to work with that pH or to help bring it up or whatever needs to be done. Most of you will know that iron products leave orangey rust stains, so if you are going to use anything with iron in it, please stay away from any paving slabs, patios, driveways, anything like that that's going to have fertilizer land on it. I know people with granular, they'll get a blower and they'll just blow off the granules that might be on patios. Some people prefer spraying liquid iron because they can control where it goes a lot easier. That's just really up to you. And lastly, I thought I might mention pets because along with health and safety here, obviously health and safety for you and for the pets. So the fertilizer that you apply from SmartLawn is safe for pets. So it's safe for them to go on the lawn after it's been applied. It's not safe for them to eat the fertilizer. So if they get a bag of it, they get their head in a bag, that's not a very good idea. There is certain situations, for example, chickens, where you might not want to apply fertilizer to an area where chickens graze because they might pick up granules thinking it's grit. But cats and dogs and children and people are quite easily able to just walk across grass, bearing in mind the iron staining granules that might get bought in the house and be a problem there. And obviously you need to think about health and safety for yourself, and if you're applying fertiliser all day long, MSDS sheets, material safety data sheets, are available on our website for all our products, and the labels also will tell you what health and safety precautions you should take. So it's just things like wear gloves when handling, and wash hands before you eat, and wearing safety specs when you're applying, especially with a spreader, overalls, that kind of thing, dust mask if it's a particularly dusty one, and yeah, just look after yourself really. But all the information on health and safety can be found, be got from us. So I think that's just about it. Gone on for a bit longer than I thought I would, actually. It's been quite fun. So with all the SmartLawn fertiliser products, all of the pricing and product information is available on the GreenBest customer portal. So if you're a customer, you'll have been told about this. If not, then we failed you. No, so we have a customer portal. You can log in. All the pricing on there is kept up to date, and you can place orders on there. You can see past orders. You can see invoices, and we have lots of other fun things in store for the portal as time goes on. So definitely check that out. We do actually have a print version of our product guide, and if you'd like a print copy of this, please go on over to the GreenBest website, click on the SmartLawn link, and then you can fill in a form to request a product guide, and we'll post that out to you. And it's quite nice to have that on your table. There's a little bit of nutrient information in there. There's a couple of pages of basic lawn nutrition, but really it's mostly overview of the products that we do, what's in them, what they're good for, etc. So that's really nice to have. So yes, thank you for watching. If you need to email me at all, my email address is here on the screen. It's daisy.lacey@greenbest.co.uk. You can also email sales@greenbest.co.uk. That goes through to Tanya, who's our sales administrator, and she's really there to sort of help you with any inquiries on your orders, etc. You can obviously phone us. Phone number is 01963 364 788, and our website there, greenbest.co.uk. And yes, if you have any suggestions for future webinars, please do let me know. Otherwise, I will see you again another time. Thank you for joining me. I'll just have a look, see if we've got any questions. Anybody got any questions they'd like to ask that I can answer straight away? No? That's great. Let's finish the slide. Oh, slides. Sorry. You may download the slides now. Here we go. So I hope you found this informative, and it's been really fun to talk about fertilizers in such a way, because I'm usually I have these conversations quite often with people, and you go through the same things, and they just come to you and say, I have no idea what I'm buying or what I'm doing. So it's been really fun. We'll do this again another time. That's great. Right, please head on over to the website probably tomorrow to get a download of the slides if you didn't grab one already. And we'll see you again another time. Bye.